Hey, welcome to another episode of Tell Me How You're Mighty, real talk about cheating. It's Tracy Shorn, Chump Lady here, and I'm with Sarah Gorel. And today we're going to talk about shady behavior and texting when you're pregnant. I got a letter, which Sarah is going to read, and then we're going to respond to it from a woman who's in a pretty rough situation.
Now you've told me you get lots of letters like this, but I read it, and my immediate reaction is aghast at the antics here. So this is someone who describes themselves as the sexting chump. Hi, chump lady. I've been with my husband for 10.5 years, married for 7.5 years. We have a 19-month-old son, and I'm currently pregnant with a baby girl due in April. My husband has a cycle of cheating. At the beginning, he's a wonderful, loving husband. He takes care of me and the house and our kid and our dogs. He's wonderful. Then he slowly gets to a normal phase. We argue a bit, but we come back together. Then he cheats and he gets short tempered and angry. We fight a lot. It's miserable to be around him. Finally, he leaves his phone somewhere and I go through it and find the evidence. I confront him. Cycle resets. But he's different about his cheating. I haven't seen this type discussed very often, and I'd love your take on it. He creates fake dating profiles using a real picture of himself, but a false name. He'll meet women this way just so that he can get attention and sext with them. If they push to meet or anything, he'll cut it off or ghost them. Over the years, he's adapted his strategy to subreddits for sexting or using apps like Whisper, now Hush, I guess. He occasionally does reach out to the same people multiple times. Well, for a time, I tried to be okay with it. I told him I understood it was an addiction and to just be open and honest with me. Let me know if he was thinking of relapsing. Tell me if it happens. He did this a couple of times, but never if it actually happened. I always caught him. Last summer, I was over it. Our son was one, and he'd been a complete slacker of a parent, not helpful, and we fought constantly. Finally, looked at his phone in early July and found messages, lots of messages. I was furious. Told him I'm done. But rose coloured glasses or whatever. So I gave him an ultimatum: stop doing this, go to therapy every week, be a better father, and reduce drinking. He's not a super heavy drinker, but he will drink and stay up super late and then relapse. So it's definitely been a cause. Then, in a spectacular moment of stupidity, I got pregnant. 3 weeks after this conversation, and entirely on accident, I was terrified but excited as we wanted a second, even more so when we found out we're having a girl, my perfect, complete family. I was put on pelvic rest for the first 20 weeks and we did fairly well with it. But after, he still wasn't interested in sex, and I couldn't shake the icky feeling that he'd relapsed since we were fighting constantly again. In December, I found the messages. Only a couple, a video saved from Snapchat, which he doesn't have on his phone, and a verification code for OkCupid. And I knew. But being pregnant with a toddler, how could I leave now? I asked for a separation. He's trying so hard to reconcile, but I just know he'll do it again. The problem is he adores me. He loves me and has always loved me. There has never been anyone else. It's all just about validation. If he was a sweetheart during these relapses, I'd probably let them happen. I don't really think I'd care as much, but he's not. And the gaslighting makes it worse. So, how do I take that last step? I'll end up needing to change jobs because I'll live with my parents. Tell me how to be mighty. This is a challenge, Tracy. How do you be mighty in these circumstances? So, some advice for the sexting chump.
Oh man, I have so many thoughts here. The first is this guy does not love you. Somehow love is not healthy and it's not really even love. This to me is a classic cycle of abuse, right? She even describes it that way. Like it's all good and he seems invested, and then the tension builds, and then she finds out he's cheating, and then he's good again, the honeymoon phase, and then the tension builds, yada, yada, yada. So, ugh, okay, let's start here. And I welcome your thoughts on this one, Sarah. I don't think this guy is creating fake dating profiles. I think he's actually dating because people who create profiles generally want to get laid. They're not in it for the validation. But that is a a common trope. It's a common cheater excuse that they say, "Oh, it was just a joke. It's just a little habit I have. It's just for fun. I never follow through on it." Yeah, that's not true. And even if
I,
it is,
what I find intriguing is the validation and the fact that she says, "Oh, I'd accept that. He's clearly addicted. He needs the validation," and then says, "And he adores me."
no, he
Right.
doesn't.
So what does adores mean? And actually, surely, if you adore somebody, then you don't need validation from anyone else. You want validation from the person that adores you. And what better validation than creating a beautiful family together? Why do you need validation from random people that you found that you've gathered online when you have somebody in your life that you adore and they clearly adore you back? Why risk that? You're risking the ultimate validation. So I suppose I'm trying to analyze behavior that I find utterly baffling.
Yeah,
But
well,
again, I'm with you on that. Does he really adore her? Do you adore somebody when you're prepared to put them through this cycle of abuse?
no, you don't adore them. I call bullshit. You don't. And people you love, you do not goad into humiliating contests with online strangers. So even though he's trying to keep his entitlement secret, he's really not because we keep doing this cycle of abuse and he knows he's going to get busted and he doesn't even sound like he's really going to great lengths to hide his shitty behavior because he devalues her, he gets mad at her, he picks fights, the classic stuff. To me, it's a very deliberate, intentional thing to do to somebody when they're vulnerable. She has a small child and she's 7 months pregnant with her other child. And it's sexual entitlement. What this guy can't go like a week, a month without sexting, without sex, without sexual validation from somebody because she's pregnant and can't, on pelvic rest. I did divorce him over that. I mean, it's just you're there just dating a human being. You don't get a break as his sex appliance for a few weeks. I mean, I find this, yeah, I don't, I call bullshit that this guy loves her. And I know that's probably really awful to hear if you're sexting chump because you want to believe that he's just a sad, misunderstood man with a problem, with an addiction. And how's all that understanding working out for you, right? Ugh.
I think it's interesting that she's expecting a little girl. And I think the question to ask yourself is, would I like to see her treated like this in the future? Would I like her future partner to be behaving in this fashion while she was pregnant? Would you like your son to behave like that or to treat his future partner in that fashion? What kind of behavior will, in a few years' time, be modeled to these children? Because ultimately, he's proved he's not going to change. He can't stop himself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny that this story about being 7 months pregnant and essentially having a D-Day. I was up in Michigan visiting family and I was on a long car trip and I was listening to Nora Ephron's Heartburn. Have you ever seen the film or read the book? Um, Nora Ephron is a famous writer, screenwriter here in the US, and she was married to Carl Bernstein of Woodward and Bernstein, the famous journalist. At any rate, he cheated on her when she was pregnant with their second child, and she had a D-Day when she was 7 months pregnant. And then she wrote a thinly veiled autobiography called Heartburn about the experience, which is hilarious, and I suggest everybody read it or listen to it. So it's a book on tape, and Meryl Streep reads it. But long story short, she leaves this guy when she's 7 months pregnant. So this letter made me think of Heartburn. And I just want to say Nora Ephron left Carl Bernstein, went on to write Sleepless in Seattle, wrote When Harry Met Sally. Her life was a huge success. She lost. So I would say, how do you be mighty? Take inspiration from people like that. Now, I know it's a lot to try to think you're like Nora Ephron, but women have left cheaters when they're pregnant. Your life is not over because you bred with a fuckwit, right? You can rebuild your life. So my advice in the short term would be focus on your pregnancy and and don't focus on him. Don't give all your mental energy to this guy. Get through your pregnancy and line up your ducks to leave him. That would be my advice.
And in terms of I think it is terrifying though. You know, she's very, very vulnerable
Yeah,
at this point. And
they
people that
choose their
abuse
moments.
yeah, people that abuse other people rely on that. And but it does sound as I remember someone saying to me, I remember my what kept me with a cheater was being terrified of bringing up four children on my own. And I remember a friend saying to me, but if you stay with him, you'll be bringing up five children effectively because you've got an extra child. You don't have a supportive partner. And something I'm really intrigued about here is he's a wonderful, loving husband. He takes care of me and, you know, all these wonderful things he does. But then on the other hand, he's investing an awful lot of time and energy into his sexting antics. You know, that takes time, that takes energy. That is energy that should be focused on his family.
Absolutely. You know, and the other thing about that is he's a wonderful father. He looks after the dog, he looks after his kid. I'm like, bitch cookie, right? That's the baseline. That's what an invested partner does. He should not get extra credit, gold star because he adults. And the fact that you have set your standards so low, and look, it's not this woman, this is like a societal problem, but you know, he should not get gold star because he occasionally shows up like an invested partner should. You need to like realize that that's baseline behavior. And he can't even adult consistently. So I don't give him credit for he looked after the dog, he looked after his kid. Yeah, no.
The other thing that's quite interesting as well is this. Well, I could forgive him if he did all the sexting and the creating the profiles and doing all this stuff online, but if he didn't behave so appallingly while he was doing it. So if the family life, if he was lovely while he was doing it, but he kind of kept that as a separate part of his life, then that would be more acceptable. What do you think about this? You know, there's this kind of, is there a hierarchy of cheating so that if you just sext online or you is that in some way acceptable? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I agree with you. You don't create a profile just to sort of then ghost them once they get interested. There's more than that. But what about if it is just fueling an addiction and seeking validation and doing it online?
That's the bargaining stage of grief talking. That's you bargaining with how bad it is and not wanting to believe how bad it is and going, okay, if it was just this, maybe I could eat a little bite of the shit sandwich, but I can't eat the whole shit sandwich. It's all a shit sandwich. Okay? And I this teeters on that whole polyamory thing with Dan Savage that, chumps consent to be cheated on. They just don't want to know about it, which I think is, first of all, I call it Orwellian dipshittery. You cannot consent to be cheated on, to be deceived. But to me, I just see her doing this bargaining stage of grief thing, whereas like, okay, I expected you to be an adult and an invested parent, but that was too much, right? So I'm going to lower the bar even further. I'm going to lower the bar to, okay, you can sext around and get validation from other women. I just don't want you flagrantly disrespecting me to my face. No, the problem is here that the bar, it doesn't matter how low you drop the bar for one of these people, they're going to want it dropped lower, right? That entitlement knows no bounds. So I would say walk away. That there's no winning move here, right? It's not that you're not tolerant enough. It's that he's abusive. I don't know, what's your take on it? You think like could you tolerate, okay, I don't know about it, or I suspect you're talking to other women, but I'm just gonna pretend like we're cool.
I just think it's such a it's so disrespectful. It's so undermining. It's so implying that, you know, by saying, "Oh yeah, that's fine. He can get on with that." It's kind of an acceptance that you're not good enough for him in his head. He needs to have validation from somewhere else. He should be getting all his validation from his family, from his partner, from his wife, not from random individual. What sort of person needs validation from random people online? How is that ever acceptable? Why would you be happy with someone living this other life? And also it's the constant detective work, isn't it, as well? The constant thinking, well, is he doing it? Isn't he doing it? Has he taken it a bit further? Is he
Right.
being honest with me?
That's
It's exhausting.
deliberate. It's deliberate. It is, and I wish we were more cognizant of this, that this kind of behavior, yeah, they're trying to do it in secret, but he knows that she knows that he has this air quote problem. He's doing this to keep her off balance. He knows it hurts her and he persists in it. And it's to keep her compliant, it's to keep her accepting his entitlement as natural. It's all a sick game to this guy. And I also want to point out the fact that she thinks that he adores her, that he's this horrible to her, and then she can also come up with he adores me, tells me that she's being whipsawed, right? That when he does the honeymoon, he's like laying on the I love you, I love you, you're the, mind fucking her. And I would say, sexting chump, you need to take a big step back and ask yourself, do I feel safe with this man? Do I feel respected by this man? Do I feel like living like this is sustainable? Do I want to model this to my children? You know, and understand that that's not adoring you. And this kind of super highs and super lows is not healthy and it's not normal and it's not love. It's the cycle of abuse. It's hard when you're wrapped up in it. Like, we
You
both
know what I remember though when I went through all this, and it's easy to hear the advice, and it's easy your logical side to think, right, yeah, this is right. Of course I need to go. Of course, and she knows that because she's asked for the separation at a time when it's so difficult to do that. When you've got a baby on the way, a very young child, it's hard to do that. She knows what she needs to do,
yeah.
but a big part of her wants you to say, "Oh no, it'll be." She knows you won't say it'll be all right because you don't. How to be mighty is as you say to model the right behavior to your children, to accept that you're better than this. You're worth more than this. But it's so hard. It's easy to hear the advice when it's for
Yeah.
somebody else, but when it's you, and you're going to be facing a new baby on your own, a toddler on your own, life on your own, all the finances that are tied up together, all the social life, everything that's tied up in a 10.5 year relationship, a 7.5 year marriage. It's going to be hard, but
Yeah.
it's almost like you need to do it now. You need to do it now to stop this cycle continuing for the next 10.5 years
Does
or
not
however
get
many
better.
years.
It does not get better. And so, okay, so she wants to tell me how you're mighty. Let's give her some really concrete, tangible, instead of just, dump the motherfucker advice, just some tangible stuff that she can do now in this situation. So, my first bit of advice would be do not be isolated. You call your parents, tell them what happened, tell your best friend, get on support boards. You can come to Chump Lady. There's a closed Reddit group and a closed Facebook group if you want 24/7 support. You talk to people, you get advice because you're going to need a lot of support because this is really hard stuff. So that's my first advice. Don't be isolated. The next thing you want to do is, shore up your finances, collect the things you need to collect. Also, don't tell him any of these things that you're doing. We call this lining up ducks. Don't tell him. Just get prepared. The next thing I would do is I would find a family law lawyer, find someone who specializes in family law, not just, your brother-in-law or someone but like an actual person who does this kind of law, and you set up a consultation and you figure out what your rights are. And lawyers see this stuff every single day. They know how to help you navigate this, and they will be full of practical things that you can do. But generally, you don't want to waste their time, and lawyers aren't therapists. So come with your documents, come with, what you own, what your assets are, and get support for yourself. Maybe see a therapist, maybe, find someone to help you get through this. But the big thing to me that seems like you have to do, and it's an ongoing process, is you have to decolonize your mind. You have a lot of you've been mind fucked. You have a lot of bad ideas here, about him, about what love looks like, about what's acceptable. And I think some good therapy and some peer support could really help you get your head straight on that, to be strong and do the things you have to do. It's not all on you. And I'm sure your family I hope they will rally around you and support you. I know, Sarah, when you went through it, you had wonderful friends, right? You had people who showed up for you in ways that you didn't think they would show up for you. And look at I mean, your kids turned out great. I mean, maybe you could probably be way more supportive to this woman than you did the scary thing. You have 4 kids and it's years later and you got out. You know, I
Yeah,
did.
and I remember so many times looking up numbers of lawyers and thinking, right, I'm going to do it, and then not doing it, and then starting it, and then not doing it because it's terrifying. And
Mhm.
it's also it's an admission that something that you thought was going to be for life is not, and somebody that you've seen who's seen you bring your children into the world was not who you thought they were, and you almost want to pretend it's not true because that's easier than facing the reality. But actually facing the reality is actually the easiest thing to do in the long term. I now realize that if I hadn't done that then, my life would be very different now. And I sometimes have nightmares where I'm still married to him. And it makes me feel so lucky, when I wake up and I'm not married to him, that I made that decision. And I don't wish him any I don't wish him any harm. I hope that he's happy with his life. I don't know that how anyone can be happy when they've had next to nothing to do with bringing out the 4 children that they brought into the world, but that's up to
Unbelievable.
him.
Wow.
Um,
I don't
so
wish
so I'm
him
not
happiness.
I'm not bitter and upset, and now it's that's all gone. But I think I would be twisted and bitter and angry if I had stayed with him because I'd have been living exactly the life that you've been hearing there. Investigating, listening to the ping of his phone, wondering if it was all happening again. Who wants to live like that?
Absolutely. And I wanted to highlight one line in this letter that really struck out to me when she found out she's having a girl. She wrote, "My perfect, complete family." And I'd like to say, you are a perfect, complete family without a fuckwit. You are an intact home. You are a whole home. You are not a broken home. You are a family. And you don't need this man to be a family.
I think that's a great way to end. Brilliant advice.
All right. That wraps another episode of Tell Me How You're Mighty. You want to leave us a mighty story or a fuckwit of the week submission? Check out our new website, tellmehowyourmighty.com. That's yours spelled Youre. We've got all the episodes, show notes, links to our guests, and you can see the tea room where Sarah and I first met. If you enjoyed this episode, please review the podcast and follow us. Thanks. See you next week.